Hello and good morning, everybody. Happy Monday to you. And hey, you know what? Welcome to another episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. If this is your first time tuning in, do me a favor. Head over to my YouTube channel. It's called the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. Now, before we get started, I would like to say that this is for educational purposes only. If you guys have any questions or comments, please put them in the comment section, and we'll be sure to answer those as we go along. Now, happy late Mother's Day to all of those out there who were celebrating, and for those who were grieving, my heart is with you. And just remember, you're not walking this path alone. Now, today we have a really, really special guest for you guys. I've had a chance to talk with her. She is amazing. Her name is Andrea, and I'm going to be bringing her up. So do you guys do me a favor? Welcome her, and we're going to get into this story. Andrea.
Hi, Tony.
How you doing this morning?
I'm good. How are you?
I am doing well. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm really excited to be here because this topic is, as you know, is near and dear to my heart.
Yes.
And I'm really happy that I'm seeing now in the culture that grief is a much more talked about conversation.
Yes. Yes.
So the tides are turning.
It really has, from when we first, and we'll talk about how long you've been doing the work and everything, but here's something that dawned on me. When I first started doing this work 5 years ago, the conversation around grief was pretty much non-existent. Yes, there were a few organizations out there doing the work, but no one was really talking about it. You know, since I started doing podcasting, I'm watching podcasters pop up. The conversations are being had. More people are being more open about it. So only in my 5 years, have I really seen the turn. But now, there's people that have been doing a lot longer than me. And I just wonder, I posed a question to them. I just wonder, what have they seen in the times that they've been doing it? 10, 15, 20 years. Now, this is, like you said, this is one that you're very, very passionate about. So now, before we get started, do me a favor. Tell people who you are and tell people where you're from.
Oh, my pleasure. Okay, so my name is Andrea Brunswick, and I am a Canadian. I live in the Greater Toronto area, so I'm in the province of Ontario. I'm a mom. I have 2 adult kids. Oh, that's a whole other subject right now because my kids have been mad at me for the last couple of years. So there's a bit of an estrangement there, but that's okay. I call myself a creative life strategist for the woman 50 and over who is frustrated where she finds herself in the present moment in her life. When you and I were talking, we make these plans, and especially, if you play in the world. And I used to be I am a life coach. I became a coach. I started getting certified in 2004. And then I was very much of new age spirituality, new thought, and all of that. So in that arena, you're really encouraged to make these goals, make your 5-year goal, make your 10-year goal, make your 20-year goal.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what happens is often we reach those milestones, but those goals didn't happen because life completely diverted our plans. And often it leaves us feeling really frustrated. But the reason why I'm here and I'm going to have this awesome conversation with you, Tony, is because, next month will be 39 years since I lost my father. And this month, what day? Today's only Monday. Oh my God. See, it already feels like Friday. Now that's scary. That's scary. All right. But we'll be 21 years since my husband's passing. So, and I've lost my mom. I lost my in-laws. So, I don't think any of us are not affected by some form of grief. And grief doesn't have to be where they've actually passed away.
Yeah.
I didn't quite understand that when I first lost my husband, because a friend of mine was going through a divorce, and she was referencing things like her divorce felt like a loss. And I could have just been so, and drenched in my own grief of losing my husband suddenly in his sleep, that I really couldn't see the parallels. But obviously, as I started to heal, I can see where those feelings, I don't want to say things are the same, because when people die, people are no longer here, and opportunity for that is gone. When people will make reference to losing a job, they're grieving over that loss of a job, or they're grieving the loss of friends because there's no more friendships.
Right.
So I think it's important for everybody, for those who have lost a friend, and for those who have actually lost, due to death, a loved one, to be, I want to be respectful to everybody and not come across like, well, your feelings don't matter, because people's feelings do matter. So this is what brings me here with you, Tony, is for us we had a great conversation in the pre-interview.
Yeah.
The podcast. So I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about your journey. And as we go, I want to, talk about those interval moments that you've had, the aha moments, right? So let's go back to the beginning, before all of these happened. What was your life like? Who was Andrea, right? Growing up before your first loss.
Who was I? Man, Tony, I'm 61 now. You're bringing me back to my 20s. Yeah, who was it? It was a long, long time ago. She's pretty been much the same, only I'm more of a mature version. So I was this free bird. I was this artist. Listen, Tony, I grew up in a very different time. When you grew up in the 70s, and your family didn't have to lock their doors, and you could come home when the street lights came on, you knew you had to be in. It was a really different time of growing up. And I really feel blessed for having that. But, I was very close to my father. I was very much a daddy's girl. That's a big part of who I was.
Okay.
Very much a big part of who I was. I had a very special relationship with my father, just due to circumstances of my mother not being in good health and having to be in and out of hospitals for surgeries and such. And he would have been classified like a Mr. Mom. So that's a real blessing to be able to have those memories. But I was just so, listen, before my father's passing, I was going to art college. One of the most renowned schools in the whole world is here in Toronto. And at the time it was like the art school, right? And I was like this, I was this wild child, Tony. I was a rebellious, disobedient, but looked like sugar wouldn't melt in her mouth. So I could get away with a lot of stuff. Yeah. But I always cared. I always had this very deep sense of belonging and connection, that when I was 15, I started to volunteer with special needs, developmentally challenged. Back then, it was politically correct to say mentally retarded. And that was what I thought I wanted to do, was to become a social worker for developmentally challenged adults. And then I decided, no, somewhere along the way, no, that's not what I want to do, but I still want to volunteer. So being a part of the community and being connected, having a lot of friends, going on the fly, again, growing up in the 70s, parents didn't have to be as involved.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Parents, and maybe it's from their generation. I mean, listen, if my parents were alive today, my mother last month would have turned 102 and my father would be 107, right? So they were born in a very different time where there was no such thing as adolescenthood or being a teenager. So I'm the youngest of three. I have a sister 10 years older than me and a brother almost 9 years older. So I'm sure by the time I came along, there was a freedom in their head. But yeah, I think that sums it up. That's pretty much who I was. And then that loss happened.
No. I want to go back because you said something that brought back some memories for me as well, right?
Okay.
And we did live in a time where we really had less supervision. You know, we were able to go out and explore the world um, without getting in trouble. Our parents used to encourage it. Go get on something. Go play in traffic, right? You know those old terms. Go play in traffic. Don't come back till the street lights come on. So a lot of people may be like, "Wow, like yeah, we got kicked out of the house." And don't let it be summertime. After and Saturday morning cartoons just went off. They off. Go bye. I'll see you later. You know, but there was a sense of simplicity that came along with that.
Yes.
We were able to not have to worry about like what the kids have to worry about in these days and age, right? Being snatched up by someone. I remember my mama used to tell me, because I did bring that up one time. Well, Mom, what if somebody takes me? She goes, boy, ain't nobody gonna take you, and if they do, they're gonna bring you right back. Don't nobody want you. Right? We didn't have those words.
No, we didn't. We didn't have the stranger danger.
Yeah.
Stranger danger. I mean, maybe we should have, because it's unfortunate, because I have a whole generation of friends that grew up in my time frame who unfortunately had some really bad stuff happen to them. So
I mean, those things did happen. But also, here's the one thing that I truly, truly miss. If those things did happen to you, your family didn't play about that, right? They were like, oh yeah, all right, let's go figure this out, because you don't need to be involved from this point on, right? Because if you grew up in a neighborhood where everybody knew you, all you had to do was tell them who you were. And then the family was like, yeah, you don't need to know what's about to happen. We're going to go handle this. And then life kept going on. People learned valuable lessons, right? And who to mess with, who not to mess with. Unfortunately, yes, the underlying challenge is that these things were happening to us, right? They were happening. And if you grew up in some families, it was like, hey, we don't talk about that.
right.
We don't talk about that. So these are things as we get older, right? I'm almost 50. So you got some time and a lot more experience than me when it comes down to those general areas. But these are things that we eventually had to heal from.
Yes.
Well, let's put it in order. We had to acknowledge that these things have happened. We had to begin to address these things and how it affected us.
Yeah.
And eventually we had to heal from those things as we move forward in life. And I think that's what makes us the human beings that we are today. And that's how we speak from the place of understanding, compassion, and empathy for the people that we do serve, because we come from a place of, yeah, I know what that was like. Although, we understand that, hey, this is about you, it's not about me. But I can come from a place of in-depth understanding, and maybe I can help you walk with yours. And we become the people that we needed when we were going through those things. So, so my next question is, and you can elaborate on any of that I just said as we begin to move forward. Now, you experienced your first loss, and you were daddy's girl, right? How did that begin to affect you, through that experience?
Well, my father had gotten sick, and it was a 4-year process before he had passed. And people say a lot of stuff around you. When I was young, I think I was 18 when my father first got sick. And because I was raised with a mother who was always ill and in and out of hospitals, and I always remember doctors always telling us, there was only so much, oh, your mother only has this much time, but she was like that cat that had 9 lives. Right. So I probably just didn't pay much attention at those times. But then I just want to back up a bit just before my father's passing, because, I would go out on a Friday night like any normal 19-year-old, 20-year-old would do. And I would come home and his heart had stopped. And then he had to be revived. And the next thing I know, he's in the hospital, he's in ICU, and he's hooked up on all these machines. And that last year of his life, he really didn't come out of a hospital. And by this point of my life, I was starting to get anxiety from hospitals and from having to go visiting. First it was my mother my whole life. Now it became my father and my mother. And it really started to cause some anxiety, but I didn't know that was anxiety.
Right.
Again, it was the early 80s and people were not talking. People didn't talk about things such as anxiety. So in any case, after my father passed, I just thought, because, while he was sick, and I guess leading up closer to that last year of his life, people would say things, oh, I guess you're really prepared for this because he's sick and it gives you that time to prepare. And I would just ignorantly agree because I just thought, oh, yeah, okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense, right? I can prepare for his passing. But Tony, no, because I didn't even understand what finality meant until my father died. Like maybe what they said, but again, I was filled with ignorance. And I don't say that to beat myself up because ignorance is just lack of knowledge.
Right.
But maybe they were just meaning like, oh, I can prepare myself to understand that he's going to pass away. I don't know. I never went back and asked these people because I just kind of looked at them. I was just left really shaking my head. So in any case, my father passed and I just thought I was supposed to go back to life. Like it was supposed to be normal.
Right.
Go back to being the little wild girl, the party girl. And it's funny because I think it was a month after my father. I'll never forget. Phil Collins was playing here. We have a place called Ontario Place. And it's beautiful. And they do outdoor concerts. And I was like, I wanted nothing more than to leave this concert. And I'm a concert goer. Like I love concerts. I'm still, even at my age, I love concerts. So my whole youth and even into my 40s, we're going to hear live music and concerts. And here I'm seeing Phil Collins and I'm like, I can't stand this performer and he's getting on my but it wasn't Phil Collins. It was where I was. I shouldn't have been. I was pushing myself to go back to what used to resemble my life. Again, filled with ignorance and not understanding that my life isn't going to look like this anymore. Right. We hear this term, the new normal.
Yeah.
Well, my life was going to be a new normal, but I didn't understand that and I didn't know it. I just knew that there was something not right with me. So I was in the last year to the Ontario College of Art, wanting the whole 4 years, planning to do the exchange program in Florence, really looking forward to that. Not being able to go to school, not wanting to be there, just not wanting. So what do we call that? Well, some people would call that depression.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. I mean, but we got names for them now, right? I'm right there with you, and I'm gonna let you continue. But I was like, you said something. Two things, right? We're expected to go back to a normal life, because with the lack of knowledge and the lack of understanding, that's the way that it was always supposed to. Because we watch other people, but I think we watch them from the surface level and not from the in-depth human level, the emotional aspect of it, right? But now, when, watching your father, going into the hospital and people saying, oh, you must be prepared. Now we have a name for that too, anticipatory grief, right? We anticipate, we pretty much have a good idea of what's about to happen, but we don't have the in-depth knowledge of what to do afterwards.
Exactly.
you know.
Exactly.
So yeah, go ahead, go ahead.
I like what you said, the surface level, and I kept thinking, yeah, it's like the Instagram or Facebook version. And that's
Yeah.
right. Like what we see today, that's what it would be. It would be like the Instagram version,
Mm-hmm.
but it was surface. So in any case, I met my husband in September. So my father passed away June. I met my husband at the beginning of September. We moved in together within 2 weeks. It was all very fast. And I didn't realize, but I brought a lot of baggage into that relationship. And one of the biggest pieces or articles in my luggage was abandonment.
Mm.
And I didn't know this. So I didn't know things that showed up, that showed up in me and in my life, and that nervousness and that fear was stemming from having lost my father. Right.
That's deep.
So, yeah.
That's
Now,
deep.
my husband's parents were wonderful, and my father-in-law, who wasn't my father-in-law yet, but even like right from the get-go, he really stepped up and he stepped into the role of like a father.
Right.
So my mother went to see my sister, married an American, and she went to go visit my sister because, anyways, I don't want to be too long-winded because I can ramble, but my sister wasn't able to come in. I know my sister
It's all
wasn't able
good.
to come for the funeral for my father because, unfortunately, my youngest niece, God bless, who's now 39, they discovered she had cancer when she was 6 months old. So she had just, had the surgery, so on and so forth. So of course my mother wanted to go, but I think felt like, what do you mean? But you don't say that because, again, when you're raised from a certain generation, where you're raised not to question things, not like I didn't have a voice in my house, because I definitely did, but you kind of knew when you could express things and not express things. But then I'm a widow now, so I understand my mother needed that trip. She needed to go and to get away because she was dealing with her own. But for me, it was like, well, now my father's dead and my mother's not here and I feel lost. So I met George, and that abandonment was showing up, but I didn't recognize it, that it was abandonment. So I started to, and of course I want to put the blame on him, right? Because what do? We like to blame other people.
Yeah, exactly.
You're making this cray chick come out. It's you and what you're doing, or it's you and what you're not doing, right? So that started us actually going to like a marriage counselor kind of thing. But then I started to seek out on my own because Tony, I just knew, like, I am not right. I'm just not right. I wanted to stuff things down. I was a partier. So I'm just wanting to no, let's go dancing. Let's go clubbing. Let's do it after hours. Let's just do this. Let's just do that. And then let's just avoid, because avoidance became really big. But I had shared this with you when we spoke last week. So whether you come to me as a coach, or you go to see a psychiatrist, or you go to see a psychologist or a psychotherapist, we're all going to ask for some information and some background so we kind of can really see who you are. Well, that's what these doctors apparently are supposed to be doing. And they're asking me, so on and so on. And I'm telling them, I just lost my father. He was sick for 4 years. I don't feel well. Even in the medical profession, did they not connect the dots? That, Andrea, you should really, we need to talk to you about your father. We need to talk about how you're feeling and what you're feeling and help you process. Because one thing I have learned through my own experience is when there's unprocessed grief, it's a very dangerous place to be.
Totally agree. I just had a really, really eye-opening experience. And I was just telling one of my colleagues, here in the office. I was talking to her. That's, before I jumped on here with you. And I was saying, here's a reality. Sometimes life will move, and this grief will change things. Unfortunately, we don't see it, right? We never even notice it, right? Because we think that we're moving through, and we think that in our world, in our mind, everything is good. Everything is good until you get to a point and life goes, hey, here's something that you didn't see this whole time. You never noticed this right here, because the way everything had laid itself out, all the things fall into place the way that we think they're supposed to, right? And we're just moving along.
Right.
And something happens, and you find yourself sitting into a brand new place around some of the same people, but now they're looking at you going, I am so proud of you. You're such a great inspiration. But although you see you're hearing this, you're going, what for? I didn't really do nothing. It took me stepping outside of the box and looking at my life from the outside looking in, because I've always looked at my life from the inside looking out.
It's a different perspective when you're the observer.
Right. Exactly. And I've always told myself, I'm an observer. I'm an observer. But this time, this whole time I was looking, I said, I didn't see this. It never dawned on me. The reality hit in, and I went, thank you. A lesson well learned. And I think the same thing for yourself, right? Because back then, it was unheard of to go to a therapist. It was unheard of that people talked about these things. And and you got your siblings, you got people, you got the therapists that are asking these questions, and you're like, what? Whatever, right? And then moving forward. Now, I want to pose this question in between while you're explaining this this next session of your life. How was the relationship with your siblings during this whole process, right? Because you got you, and then you got your siblings, you got your family members, and things like that. And all of you have just experienced something similar in this loss.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah. And so, you're going back to the wild child moment, right? You know what I'm saying? Going out there. And you deep down inside that there's something that's not sitting right. So how was your relationship with your siblings and moving forward?
Well, so as I said, my sister doesn't live here. So she lives in Florida. She's still there. My brother is in the city. Okay. So they're 10 and 9 years older than myself.
Okay.
So by the time I was 13, they were both married and both out of the house. And then I became an aunt at 15. So they were already starting their families. Now my brother, I really want to paint him in the right light, because I don't want to do a disservice to my brother. Right. My brother and sister, the three of us are from the same mother. My mother's first husband passed away. When my sister and brother were little, their father died. He took his own life. And funny enough, they were similar ages to when my kids lost their father. So they had already had this experience with losing a parent. And my brother, I can only imagine, because they lost their father, it was like 1960, maybe 1959, 1960. So, what we said to boys about, big boys don't cry, and you have to be the man of the house, and oh my God, talk about stuffing emotions down. And then he became a lawyer, a litigation lawyer. So, lawyers have to have a specific kind of personality. So, yeah. When I got the call that my father passed, this is an important story to illustrate. So I went to the hospital, and I went to go to his room, but he wasn't there. They had moved him into like a utility closet until the funeral home came for him. So my brother took me. Now, Tony, this was my very first time ever seeing a dead body. and now it's my father's. And I started to cry, and my brother told me to stop crying.
Mm. Mm.
So that's kind of, yeah. So there was never conversations, because I don't think there was conversations with my sister and brother when they lost their first father. Now this is their second father, because my father had adopted them legally,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I don't think they had anybody talking to them in order for them to process unprocessed grief. So I think it was a bit of a shit show. Excuse my French.
No, hey, you're good. You're definitely good.
Yeah.
Because sometimes you got to throw that in there to express. I mean, you just sometimes we have to use words to actually put things into perspective. And this is the reason why I tell people, hey, this is not for children. This is for the adults, because sometimes you got to throw those in there, man. You got to, you know what I'm saying? Because, how do you tell somebody gently that life just gave you an uppercut, right? How do you tell somebody gently that what you're going through in a nice, polite way is the worst thing you've ever experienced?
Exactly.
Sometimes you have to throw a damn and a fucking shit inside of there. Excuse my language for everyone, but we're all adults here, and things like that. And I know a lot of people that are tuning in right now, especially on Instagram. Thank you guys for tuning in. Can agree that, you know what? But no, sometimes I have to throw that in there so you can have a better understanding of how it really affected me.
Yeah,
Right?
and it really affected me, Tony.
Exactly.
It really, well, I mean, remember when I said to you that I was seeking out help and I was seeing psychiatrists and so on and so forth. So George and I had lived together for 3 years, and then we got married. And I was so not happy about getting married. Not about not getting married to him, but the whole wedding, because the things that a father represents to a daughter.
Right.
Like, my father won't be here to walk me down the aisle. My father won't be here to have that father-daughter dance. My father will never, if I become a mother, because of course I'm only in my 20s and was not my headspace about becoming a parent. My father won't be here to see and meet his grandchildren and, all of these things.
Yeah.
So now I'm realizing all of the stuff that is not going to happen. And it didn't matter. I couldn't stuff these feelings down deep enough. Fine. I got married. Yes, it was a beautiful wedding. But a year after the wedding, the depression got really bad. And the longing for my father got even worse. I remember I had this picture of him. My father was in the British Army. And there was a picture of him in his military thing with his beret. And that was his picture that I always had. And I had it in a very beautiful frame. And I would hold that picture and I would cry to that picture. And I would talk to that picture. Anyways, things were getting worse. A lot of my friends were seeing therapists at the time. I guess it was the thing with the in crowd, right?
Right.
So a friend of mine who I had grown up with recommended the psychiatrist that she was seeing. So I went to the psychiatrist. It was my first time there. Again, protocol, asking your background, blah, 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 blah. She did say that I was depressed. She didn't make any connections to his passing. And she wrote me a prescription for Prozac. Yeah. And Prozac had just come on the market. And I think I was on my third refill of it when I took the whole bottle and that was it. I just didn't want to live anymore. I couldn't do this. One of the side effects now I know, because back then the pharmaceutical industry didn't have to, you know how now when you get a prescription, it has to tell you all of the side effects. Well, 1989, they didn't have to tell you all of the side effects.
Right.
But as we know now, that antidepressants can increase suicidal thoughts. Well, mine were like up here. And as I said, I tried to take my life. I was rushed to the hospital. They did whatever they needed to do. And even then in the emergency room, they still didn't make the connections to what and why that this was a depression from grief. This wasn't a depression This was depression specifically caused from grief and unprocessed grief. They let me go.
Hmm.
They just, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
But that also goes back to the time too, right?
It definitely does.
Nowadays, you know what I'm saying, we've come a very, very long ways into actually, and it was something that we've been trying to, because I got into this before COVID, right? And during that time, it was such a taboo thing to talk about. There was people out here trying to make waves. They were doing the thing, but it wasn't as talked about as frequently and as openly as it is now. Because now we realize COVID actually said, hey, you know what? We're about to address these things. And we're going to put you in a situation to where we're going to have to bring this out to the forefront. Now, as crazy as COVID was, it was a true blessing in disguise for those of us who were coming out and going, we have a problem.
Yeah. Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah, Houston, we have a problem, right? And now they realize, oh, shoot, we have a problem. Mental health, depression, anxiety, unseen grief. We need to heal, suicidal ideation, because guess what? When it was happening, it was easy to sweep it under the rug. We can write something in the papers. And we have become so desensitized to the things that were going on. We didn't see how often it was happening. Alcoholism, right? Or addiction, homelessness, all of these different things. Hey, guess what? We're going to have to start normalizing the talk around this, because if not, this is going to keep happening. It's going to keep getting worse. So although, those who have been affected by this part of the journey in our lives, there were so many great things that came out of it, because it allowed individuals like ourselves to step up to the plate and go, remember when we tried to tell you those things? Ta-da! Ta-da! But see, back in the day, like, I'm a 70s baby too, right? I was born in the 70s. So I grew up in the 80s, some similar, in the household. We didn't talk about those things, I was told, man up.
Right.
I was told, young boys don't cry.
And suck it up. And suck it up.
Those two words, man up. And I posed this question in one of my groups. I think I was doing a group in Italy, one of my satellite groups. And I posed this question: how many men in this group have been affected by that term, man up? And then it dawned on me, so many other men raised their hand, like, yeah, I was told to man up and this, that, another. I said, and how did it affect your life as you begin to move forward? And Andrea, when I tell you that 98% of them went, I was so lost that I didn't want to do it anymore. I was told to man up, so I didn't understand the emotions that I was going through. Right. And it put them into a state of confusion.
Total confusion.
Right.
Total confusion.
So I can relate to what you were saying right there. I was like, man, how many times have that led us down a dark path where we said, you know what? Screw this life. Let's get this life over with so I can go into the next life. And hopefully I don't have to deal with this over anymore, the next one, right? But that's not, here's the reality. As long as we love, and this is something that, that we all have to understand, there's no avoiding this. As long as we love, we're going to have grief.
And they say, I've heard it said, I feel it to be true, but the deeper you love, the deeper the pain.
The deeper the grief. Yeah, the deeper the pain, right? A lot of people look, the reality of it is, when you experience deep pain and you've never experienced it before, there's a different mindset that comes along with that.
It's very different.
That's the reality, right? Because if you've never experienced it before, what do you got to go by? And even if you do have something to go by, what makes you think that this is going to be the same as the last one? It's not.
Or what makes you think it's going to be different?
Yeah, what makes you think it's going to be any different? So again, no blueprint. This is the reality, and I love that you said that, right? Because everybody, there's a lot of people out here that have that misconception, not understanding it is yours. There's no blueprint to this.
I love that. See, and I very much relate to the word, because what I do as a coach
Mm-hmm.
is I give a blueprint to my client, right? To really be able to fulfill that part of themselves that they feel so unfulfilled by.
Mm-hmm.
So I very much love the term blueprint. But Tony, people say the craziest things.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think it comes from a place of meaning to sound like an ignoramus. but
yeah.
But people, when I lost George, and I lost him 18 years later after my father, and we'll talk about that if you want, but I just think that this is important, because what people would say to me would be, you shouldn't cry in front of Ryan and Natalie. What do you mean I shouldn't cry in front of Ryan and Natalie? Like, I don't think sometimes people just say things, but they don't see the ramifications.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, when somebody said, you shouldn't cry in front of your children, all I saw was, my children are going to think I didn't love their father. My children are going to think that they can't cry. My
Mm-hmm.
children are going to think that they have to stuff it down in somewhere to this deep, dark place inside of them until it erupts like it did with me when I lost my dad, because that's what happened. All of that stuffing, it just erupted. It erupted. It was like my brain exploded, right? It was like coming out of me, just to kind of create a picture, an imagery there. So when people are telling me, or they would tell me, my role as a wife got taken away. That was a really important role for me. I really treasured that role. Right. I treasured being a mother, but I treasured being a wife. Oh, just focus on your kids. Well, your kids aren't supposed to be your friends.
Yeah, they're your kids.
They're my children. They're not my friends. So people say, Tony, the craziest things. And I think that's why you often hear people will say, I don't know what to say to that grieving individual. And I get that, because even me, with my experiences of loss, sometimes when I go onto Facebook and I'm seeing people posting about, that they've just, whether it be they've just lost one of their parents, or one of their adult siblings, or I'm, even at a loss for words, my heartfelt condolences. I don't even really know what to say. There is no script. There's no script.
There's no script to it, right? Now, I wanted to elaborate on that, maybe, spread a little bit more understanding about it. You hit on something. A lot of times people don't know what to say. So it's not that they come from a place of malice to try to
No, not at all. Not at all.
They're trying to relate to us the best way they know how. And sometimes, as a person who's going through the grieving, experience this grieving, this deep, dark, emotion that's starting to erupt like a volcano. And people don't understand, the more and more people say things that we may not understand, because again, here's the truth. Our world has changed. Yes. The things that people would normally say to us, we may take personally, because our world has changed. The things that people normally would suggest to us before this happened. See, nothing has changed. Only thing that changes is our world, our understanding of the world.
Yeah.
Right? So these individuals do not understand that unless they've experienced that sort of depth of pain and emotional turmoil that we've now entered into.
Exactly.
Right? And so people want so bad for us to go back to the way things were, that they come up and they will say something, and we may take it personally, although they're not meaning into that aspect. They're just they're doing what comes natural to them because of the relationship that they have with you.
Yes.
So And I love the fact that, that you said as a life coach. Now, here's what I wanted to put out there, and tell me what you think. As a life coach, you do have the ability to come up with a blueprint so people can live their best life, right? To accomplish those goals, to be able to go out and into the world and have the best possible human experience possible, right? As they begin to grow and build businesses, living their best life. Now, as a grief coach, I do with that word grief. That's why I said there's no blueprint to it. Now, as a coach, I could put a blueprint, a solid blueprint together that you can put the pieces in as you go, but also with the understanding that this is yours. And that's why I come up with these little things that people, hey, this is yours. But these are some solid things that can help you begin to move forward, right? But this is not going to look the same as his or hers or theirs. This is yours. So I leave those as a blank statement for them, like, hey, and I ask solid questions, right, to make them start to explore this thing that we call grief, this unknown world of grief, and they can begin to put these things together. But what the premise of, because my motto is, I want you to look back on the life, not focus on the death, but look back on the life that you have with this individual. And then I changed the questions up a little bit, saying, hey, moving forward, what was some of the things that you did that made you happy when you was with your loved ones? Oh, I did this. Why don't you go out there and do those things? Why don't you just go out there, little things, implementing, because that's where I got the term memories of us from, right? Focus on the memories. Let's focus on the things that made you smile. Because if you got a whole lifetime of those, you only have one incident where your life changed, and now you have this great thing that you're carrying around with you. But let's focus on this, because that's part of your healing process. Let's focus on the things the hard times that you have with this individual, not hard times, but challenging times where you may have to felt like you wanted to throw punch him or something like that. So, and that's, just to elaborate on those things, there are ways that we can put things into perspective.
Absolutely, Tony. And I just want to touch on something, because you brought up something really important. We do want to live our best lives.
Yeah.
That's our intention. We're here to live, and we really want to be able to fully live it.
Right.
And really, to live our full life is to heal our soul. Because when our soul has all of these gaping wounds, it really doesn't matter. But that best part won't come the more you resist your healing. Now, there was a lot of things I couldn't do after George died with the kids, things that we did as a family.
Right.
Right. There were things, like Canada Day long weekend. We would take the kids to a place by our house that did fireworks and had live music. I was having massive anxiety. I think I had shared a story with you. I took, because the kids were only 5 and a half and 10 when George passed.
Right.
They were still young. And there was a TV show my daughter would watch, and that character was coming to our local mall. And the year before that, we went as a family. And here I was a year later, and my husband's not with me. And I felt like I had the word freak stamped on my forehead. And if I saw young families and fathers with their young children on their shoulders, I was having panic attacks in the mall.
Yeah.
And I had to say to the kids, after the show, I was able to contain myself after the show. And I let Ryan, he was into Yu-Gi-Oh cards back in the day, and he was trading them at the store in the mall. And I let him do his thing. And then it was like, yeah, we got to leave. We got to go. Right. We got to go now, because Mommy asked, we have to leave now. So there's a lot of things that I couldn't go back to doing the pain was just too deep. And I think sometimes we will force ourselves. I think I was forcing myself because we have these traditions, right?
Mm-hmm.
And traditions are very important. And I come from a very traditional home of traditions being all the time. I couldn't
Right.
do these things.
Right.
And then sometimes we tend to be so mean to ourselves. But you should be doing this, especially when you have your kids involved and there's the loss of your spouse. So for me, Tony, I want to mention this story because I think it's important because I really want whomever's watching to hear this. When I shared with you those suicidal thoughts of taking my own life and my kid's life a couple months after George passed, I was freaking out. I literally was freaking out. I got so scared. But I heard God say to me, go and find the card to the grief counselor from the funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
I could have went to the local hospital and they would have drugged the crap out of me and put me in a straitjacket and then put me on the walk ward and then got children's aid and taken my kids. But I listened to God and I'm so grateful that I did. And Isabel, the grief counselor from the funeral home, said, well, I told her what was going on. I'm like, Isabel, I'm really scared. I'm having thoughts about taking my life and the kid's life where no one's going to get hurt because we just want to be, you said it, we want just to go back to.
Right.
I wanted my family back intact. And she said, Andrea, I want you to know that that's normal. And that is all part of grief.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what if, Tony, there would have been somebody for me to have spoken to all those years prior when I was in that grief depression and wanting to take my life, and I had been put on Prozac and not monitored properly.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody said, a doctor or a grief counselor said, hey, that's normal. It's a normal part of the process. Now, maybe that would have allowed me to take a deep breath like it did when I was told that so many years later. Maybe it wouldn't have made a difference. But, Tony, one day I think, sorry to cut you off. One day I think we need to have a conversation because it's, as we're talking about all of this, it's reminding me of when I was in bereavement groups, and there has to be a relatability, and there's the 5 stages of grief, and they want to be able to theorize everything and put everything into a book when something such as this aren't theories. It's practical. Right. I had to get that out. I just had to get that out.
I definitely understand. And that I started thinking when you were saying that, and I posed this question. Time and time we begin to slow everything down and begin to dissect it and better understand it.
Yes.
Now, in the beginning stages, I posed the question: if someone had told you this in the beginning, would you have believed them? Considering the time that you grew up in, would you have believed them, or you would have looked at them like they was full of shit?
I probably would have looked at them like they were full of shit.
Now you understand, right? So, like everything falls into place when it's supposed to fall into place.
Yes.
Right? It's just like anybody going through the beginning stages. If I come to Andrea and say, man, Andrea, how's your grief today? First of all, the language that I just used, would you have understood that? Right? Probably not. You would look at me like, what's
he talking about?
Yeah. And then you tell me these things and I go, man, that's totally normal what you're going through. You would probably get up and go, don't you talk to me that way. I would throat punch you. I got a family and everything else. I'm telling you what I'm feeling. And all of a sudden now you telling me that this is normal. No, this is not normal. Because for one, you're emotional. The emotions have taken control of the language that you're using. When we talk about the 5 stages of grief, look, those are great pillars. That's all. They're just great pillars. People have to understand that the 5 stages of grief were meant for those who were going through terminal illness and cancer. They were written in those things. Do they apply? Yes, but there's so much more that goes into it. So if you can understand that they're pillars, And that every pillar you can add things to. There's no right or wrong answer to this. This is what you're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Now the truth of the matter is, as we begin to move and grow in our grief, we realize that there's a certain truth in the way that we label what we're going through. Those 5 stages of grief, as solid as they are, there's other labels that go through what you're going through. You have to be honest about putting the right label on your emotions. Not everything is depression or sorrow. You can be flabbergasted. You can be angry. You can be, you can be confused. Right? You can go in one aspect quicker than you can the other aspect. Doesn't mean that it overrules that one. It just means that it just switched. Right? It just added to it. And then you got to go back in and go, man, what is this thing? No, it's not angry. It's not sorrow. It's not depression. It's not the anxiety. Oh my God, I'm having a panic attack.
Yeah.
Right. And you use these words. And I think that's beautiful because you understand them. Right. But for our listeners and everything, I want to let them know that, hey, you have to be honest about what you're going through, what you're feeling, and things like that. Like you said, prime example, being and going to see the movie and understanding that, hey, I'm going through a panic attack, but I have to leave. So you understood what your body was telling you that you needed to do. And you knew that you had to take certain necessary steps in order to understand it. So over time, and that's what I want people to understand as well. And I think that, your goal was to help people understand this as well, that, hey, sometimes in the beginning, it's okay if you need some time to yourself.
Yes.
This up here in order, because your heart's going to tell the mind something, different. And your mind's going to tell the heart something that's different.
Exactly.
Right? So time, if you need to go sit down somewhere to just get your shit together.
Exactly, Tony.
Right?
If you need that time to isolate a little bit, I think people fear a lot of things because, again, the world says a lot.
Yeah.
There's a lot of ignorance out there, and the world's. Listen, friends thought I was doing so great because I was able to, I was able to do the grocery shopping, and I was roasting chicken, and I was making dinner for my family. Oh, Andrea, look how well Andrea is doing. Yeah, am I? Am I really? Or does Andrea wear a mask?
Yeah.
Does Andrea wear a mask?
Yes.
Okay, because Andrea wears a mask. And I'm not going to want my kids to know that I'm not okay. I don't want that fear in them. I'm taking care of an elderly, sick mother. No, I can listen. Women, we're really good at that makeup and making it that mask and hiding things from people. And Tony, really, do people really want to hear? Can we really expect people to, like they say, and yes, we can all have loving, caring people in our life, and we need them. But it's not their role. It's not their role.
I want to add to that. Here's the difference, right? When you surround yourself with people who've gone through something similar and those who have never experienced it. One was sugarcoated.
And the
other one's going to be honest with you.
Yeah.
That was the one thing. Look, when I experienced the loss of my son, I wanted so desperately for someone to tell me that this was a dream. Right. I'm going to wake up tomorrow and I'm going to get a phone call saying, go pick my son up from school. Maybe he got in trouble. I'm waiting for to get a phone call. Say, hey, can you come pick up your son? He just got into a fight or something.
Right.
The reality of what it took my neighbor that had just gone through something similar because he lost 2 of his sons just through life. And they were young. That man came up to me and told me something that helped me change my whole perspective. He said, look, this right here is going to be the hardest thing that you've ever done. it's going to fuck you up.
Yeah.
You're going to want to jump out and want to run in traffic. You're going to take things personally. He was honest with me. So
Yeah.
is there a difference? Yeah, I would rather you come to me and tell me, it's about to get really bad. It's about to get really bad.
Yeah.
But the truth of the matter is that you have people who've gone through something similar. You don't want me to sugarcoat what you've gone through, because if I tell you that it's going to be okay and things like that, you're going to want to fight me. So I'm going to tell you right now, I'm going to be real honest with you. This is going to get bad, right? I would rather you be honest with me
Then BS you.
and then BS me, right? Because if you tell me that things are going to be okay and I mess around and find myself with a gun pulling into my head, or like yourself, like I'm about to kill everybody. Because I don't want them to suffer. Because I'm tired of suffering. I know that they're tired of suffering, because emotionally, this is what my emotions are telling me to do. This is what the world is skipping past, because I have to put on a mask. I don't want to pretend.
Right.
Right. The reality of it is that, once we find out over a period of time what we've experienced, what we're going through is totally normal.
Right. Like that woman, Isabel, the grief counselor.
It's totally normal.
Honestly, I'm so grateful for God, because if it wouldn't have been for God, and if it wouldn't be my relationship with God, I wouldn't have done that. I wouldn't have recognized his voice and the instructions and the intuitiveness to go do what I was supposed to do. Right, and that was to find her card and to speak to her. And because look at Tony, I had already gone through years of seeking out help from the loss of my father and in the medical profession, and not receiving the help I need. So what would make me think that had I went to my local hospital, to an emergency room, that I or my children would have received what was needed? Because I probably could bet you a lot of money. If I had a lot of money, I'd bet you a lot of money. But I don't, so I'm not going to. But, I wouldn't have received what I needed.
Exactly.
And that's why people like you and myself who have experienced it, okay, yes, I have schooling, and yes, I was going to be a social worker, and I've got all of that. Great. Great. Big deal. Big deal. Because it's when you've been through it, and you've walked through the fire, and you've been in the fire, and you've gotten out of the fire, okay, is when you can truly say, here, take my hand, and I'm going to walk beside you.
Exactly.
And I'm not going to let you go.
And that's the part right there that a lot of people don't understand. You can have all the schooling in the world. You can have all the, look, I got certifications. I got the certifications because I thought I was going crazy.
Yeah.
That's all it means. It's just, I thought I was going crazy. But I will tell you this, those certifications don't hold a candle to the experience.
Absolutely not.
I got the certifications because, and I never even studied for any of these certifications. None of them. I did it because I was like, where's this knowledge coming from? Where's these things coming from? When I got these certifications, I did it because I wanted to prove God wrong. That's the only reason why. I'm going to do this, but if I fail at it, don't you pressure me no more. Let me just go ahead and disappear.
Yeah.
That's what I wanted, to disappear from the world, because I got tired of feeling the way that I was, feeling like I'm
absolutely
being
Tony,
or you know what I'm saying, going through these emotional turmoils that I never really understood. That's the reason why I did it. I didn't do it to showcase, oh, look at me or anything like that. I did it because I wanted to prove that I was going crazy.
Right.
I didn't want to feel as if I was right about what I was feeling.
Right.
That's the only reason why I did it. I'm not going to study for it. If this is real, then I'm going to take it, and I should be able to pass it. Deep down inside, I was like, I'm going to fail. And that's going to validate, right? It's going to validate everything that I'm already, assuming about my life. And when I started passing them, I said, well, the next one I'm going to fail. That's going to be my excuse to stop. And then when I passed it, well, the next, I kept going the next one, the next one.
Right.
And I was like, after a while, I was like, okay, maybe there's something to this. Maybe there's something to that. Let me just explore this a little bit more. I'm like you, Andrea. If I had not listened, I wouldn't be doing what I was doing, what I'm doing right now. I wouldn't be where I am in these stages, in this phase of my life
Right.
of deeper understanding. And I think that's the difference between those who have the certification that went through and think that it's a great idea than those who have gotten the certifications because we walked through the fire.
Yeah.
And it goes back to a quote that I read a while ago. When you've walked through the fire and you come through the other side, we now have the strength to go back in with that bucket of water to help give you what you need so you can go through yours. Every storm that we go through, the storm what pushes out to the side, it would tosses up in the air, and bounces around, right? But those who get up and manage to get through the other side, we go, I see you in there. I'm on my way. We're not trying to fix the problem.
No, we just want to be here for the soft landing.
We want, and to let you know that, hey, you have a little bit more to go.
And hey, you're not alone. And hey, you're not alone.
Exactly.
Hey,
You're not alone. So therefore, you know what? I cannot go through it and do it for you. But what I can do, I can provide you company.
Right.
While you sit down and take a deep breath and rest. But I can't get up for you. Yeah. But I'm here when you do.
Exactly.
And we're going to weather this.
And I'm not going to push you to get up.
I'm not going to push you to get up.
I know, Tony, we're probably way over time, but
we'll wrap it up. But we're definitely going to do a part 2. But no, go ahead.
I think so, because I think for part 2, Tony, at least it was a very big part of my story. I shared this with you last week. Was my anger, the shame, and the guilt. Shame and guilt that I felt as a daughter because I really became a little bitch, especially that last year of my father's life.
Yeah.
When I had said to you, I couldn't go to the hospital. I couldn't stay there. I couldn't do these things anymore. Right. Yeah. And that leaves us with such shame and guilt, or it did to me. If it did to me, one thing I've recognized now, 61 years going around and around and around, if it's happening to one person, it's happening to a lot of people.
Right.
If I've suffered from shame and guilt and anger, other people are suffering from that.
Exactly.
And I think that's a really necessary and important. I have my friends now are all doing that. It's called the sandwich generation. Because I was born to older parents, I lost mine. I was way, on that trajectory. I was like way ahead. Okay. No one wanted to talk to me about it. Their parents were younger and healthy. Who the frick wants to talk to you? But I can now impart some of my own experiences, possibly wisdom and knowledge. I have one friend in particular. Her mother has a very bad Alzheimer's, and it's very hard for my friend to be there. But, nobody knows. I didn't know my husband was going to die in his sleep. So we don't know if we're promised tomorrow. Right. And I've just said to her, she can do with what she wants with it, obviously. But I don't want her to have the shame and the guilt because she's not spending as much time with her mother, even though it's hard. And I get that.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I would love to do a part 2, Tony. I think
we're definitely going to do it. Because we're just not getting into the meat of this, but we knew when we was going to talk and everything that we was going to have a great conversation, and there's a lot of people that agree with us as well. So guys, we will be doing a part 2. So you guys, if you guys are enjoying this conversation, first and foremost, Andrea, as we begin to wrap this up, I want to say thank you for joining us today. And we're going to talk a little bit after to set up something different, go over some
Thank you, Tony. So I love this. See, and this shows me, I'd like to ask this to you because for me, I think when George first passed, very soon after, I started to share a lot of this.
Mm-hmm.
And it had a negative repercussion on me.
Mm-hmm.
So I think sometimes when we're sharing, like now, I'm okay. Like there
Right.
is no before, maybe a few years ago, I would have got that in my heart
Right.
and it
Right.
would have been pulling on me,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I think we have to recognize that even though we may want to share something because we see an individual really could benefit from it, it may not benefit us, and we need to really know if we're ready and if we've healed enough, if those wounds in the
Right.
soul have closed enough. Because if there's still even that little bit of the hole in that gaping wound, that big, it can reopen, and
Right.
then
Exactly. But I think it's part of the process, right?
it
Because
is.
those wounds, those wounds that we have, that we often believe that they're closed. And this is just for me. I'm starting to realize that they never really close. Right? Healing is going to be something that I'm going to do for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
The question is, how comfortable am I to talk about it? And I think every time we have these conversations, or every time that we address those wounds that we think that are closed and they open up just a little bit more, it's going to be, we heal a little bit more because now we start to
Right.
acknowledge those things through our stories. But I think that's
Exactly.
what makes our conversation so genuine, because we do come from a place of, having,
Vulnerability. We're
yes,
vulnerable and we're authentic.
right. And we're authentic in it, right? Because there's something about those stories that when people hear us say it, they feel it. Because
Yes.
it does remind us that, hey, yeah, it may have been 10 years, it may have been 15 years, it may have been 20 years, but now, what I'm saying, we're here in this moment.
Right.
So let's see where this takes us, right?
Correct.
So
Correct.
yeah, our healing journey is going to be something forever. And it's nothing to be ashamed about. It's just that now we have labels that we can put on it from
Yes.
our perspective of understanding.
Yes.
And although you may see a tear come down our eyes, it doesn't mean that I'm going backwards. It just means that, wow,
There's
I
something you need
forgive.
to release.
Yeah,
There's
you have to
something
release it,
we
right?
need to release.
Yeah, yeah. So before I let you go, what can you leave the audience? If you can leave the audience with something, what would you leave them with?
Hmm. I don't want to sound cliche. So,
That's
what
okay.
would I leave your audience with? There are amazing individuals out there who can really facilitate you in the process. And grief is a process. Okay. There's no true final destination, as you were just sharing, Tony.
Mhm.
But there's a process to this healing, to your journey. Listen, life itself is a process, and it's ever evolving and
Mhm.
ever changing. And if you think you're not okay, don't be afraid, but just reach out. Reach out, because there are people. There's Tony, okay? That this is solely the work that you're doing, right? So there's somebody such as yourself. There's somebody such as myself. That day, I was so blessed to have Isabel from the funeral home.
Right.
Okay. So we have to reach out. Take the time for yourself. Take the time. Don't worry that you're offending people. And today we live in this freaking society where everybody takes such great offense,
Mhm.
right? Everybody's offended by something you
Mhm.
said. But you don't need to worry if your friends are wanting to come and keep you company, but you just can't do it right now. Just be honest. You don't have to say too much, but
Mhm.
you can just say, you know what, I just can't right now. But
Yeah.
don't keep yourself there, because that's the problem with isolation.
Yeah.
It ends up being I can't even talk this much. jail cell. Thank you. And we lock ourselves in. Okay.
Yeah.
So reach out. Reach out. You don't have to do this alone. Somebody will lead you through this process.
Yes.
Okay. And they want to hear you. We want to hear their pain. We also want to hear the memories, and we want to hear them sharing the stories, because they need to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And we want to hear it. So
Yeah.
I hope that's helpful to your viewers.
Very helpful. I felt that in depth right there, you know. But Andrea, where can people find you?
So people can find me right now. Presently, I'm not renewing my website because I don't know if I want to do a website. I might do an app, Tony, but until I do that, you can find me on Instagram under Andrea Brunswick, on LinkedIn under Andrea Brunswick, and on Facebook under Andrea Julia Brunswick. I am going to be starting on TikTok, I think. I'm going to create an account. I'm not sure, but for now, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram. And Tony, I sent you links for, I'm offering a 30-minute free, totally, it's not a sales call. It's my way of what I really, truly love to do. God bless me with a specific ear to hear what is not being said.
Mm-hmm.
And it's trained and it's tuned to help you get that breakthrough.
Right.
So it's going to be a powerful 30 minutes. So I sent you that link, and I sent you the link because I created a very anointed book. I'm so excited the way God led me to create this prayer journal. I'm very new on my walk with God in this way and learning his word. So it's a very creative way to take scriptures that God will give you, because just like he's given me, I used to hear my Christian friends talk about their personal scripture. They'll be like, what are you talking about? But then one day I realized, oh, I have my own personal scriptures. So I use those as an illustration in the prayer journal just to help guide that individual.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a free ebook, and I would love it. It's called Stamp It on Your Heart. Because from my understanding, the word of our Father is a seed, and our heart is the soil, and the seed needs to crack and root. And oh, one more thing. This is what I want to say to people. If you think about life, nature, and you think about the darkness in which you plant the seed underground and how much actually takes place, the majority of the life process is happening in the darkness. So don't be afraid of the darkness, because that is where your true transformation is starting to happen before you, boom, come above the soil.
Mm-hmm. I love that right there. I love that. And you did send me those links. They are in the description. So people, if you're looking for some gifts, Andrea has done really good about making it available to you guys. Go down to the description, check those out, but also go check her out on her social media. If you guys love this conversation, we're going to have to do a part 2. So you guys keep an eye out on that. Andrea, again, thank you for being a part of the show, sharing your journey, your knowledge, your wisdom, and your presence, your revive, right? You know what I'm saying? All the good vibes that are come along with this. And again, you guys, thank you for tuning in. This is going to wrap up this episode of the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. And as you guys know, we're going to keep bringing these stories, these beautiful stories with these amazing people to you guys. And if you guys made it all the way through, if you haven't already, head over to my YouTube channel. It's called the Grief Let's Talk About It podcast. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell notification so you'll be notified every time we drop a new episode. And if you know anyone that can benefit from these conversations that we have, please share this along with them. This helps us get the content out there to more and more people. And with that being said, I am Tony Lynch. I am your host. If you're a man looking for support, please go to my website, www.mensgriefsupport.org. We are a nonprofit organization that's dedicated to helping those men that are struggling with loss. Let us know. Let me know what you need. If you're a woman and you just need support or something like that, let me know. I have many, many connections. The people that you see up here, please reach out to them as well. This is going to conclude this episode. We guys will see you in the next one. You guys have a great day. And thank you. Love you. Peace.
Thank you, Tony.
You're welcome.